On today's episode of Whiteboard Wednesday, we're going to take a look at how you can use simple variations of a quarters coverage to try and prevent the offense from feeling comfortable attacking you vertically down the field, and ways you can mix it up against different formations to stay unpredictable and not give quarterbacks those simple progression reads that they thrive on in today's modern passing game. So the first thing I want to look at is kind of our distribution as a coverage, and what do I mean by quarters coverage? A typical quarters coverage, the common theme you're going to find across, there's many different ways you can play it, certainly more than we're going to cover today, is you're going to have four defenders ultimately responsible for the vertical portions of the field based on how many receivers are attacking you vertically. Now, the reason why I say that is not all quarters coverages automatically have four guys lined up, kind of like you'd see in a cover three, where you have those three guys aligned deep at the snap of the ball. There's lots of versions of quarters coverage where you can have a carry player. So you may line up in what looks like a cover three, kind of like what we have on the screen here. This looks like your traditional cover three cut weak, but we're going to show you how you can do carry techniques with multiple players to get to that cover four, as well as a few more simple ways to look at playing quarters. So first off, in terms of covering down on receivers, whatever defense you play, you're going to have rules for how you align to different formations. And you have some options if you want to run quarters on how you do that when you get into different formations. One of the key things you're going to want to be able to do, though, is always have one more defensive back to each side of the field than there are a number of receivers, including linebackers as well. So when we look at the distribution here, typically, like we have here to the field, we have a three receiver surface with four DBs or linebackers associated with the coverage to that side. So here you got your field corner, your field halfback, your Sam or dime linebacker, and your free safety to the field. And in the boundary, you have a two receiver surface with your boundary corner, your boundary half, and ultimately your will or weak side linebacker will be responsible for factoring in there. One of the big points I want to talk about is coverage from the linebacker position. I think it's something that's really overlooked and has become so important in today's game. Okay, and that's why I have the Mike drawn in blue here. Okay, blue for the back. He's actually going to drop and match the back. So if that back were to release and become a fourth receiver to the field, he will now become a low wall to the field, creating a fifth defender. If that back creates a third target in the boundary, we now need to create a fourth defender on that side, and he will now be the low wall to that side. If the back does not release, he can be a hole player, and he can communicate with the Will and the Sam from that middle of the field if you get some kind of crossers, mesh, that type of thing. But I think it's pretty common for a lot of teams still to just drop that Mike into the middle of the field. And if you're getting a back who's releasing, it can cause stress on your other underneath defenders if he's not walling to that side. So the first basic version of cover four I want to look at, okay, is a basic cover four where we're going to have our boundary corner, our boundary halfback, and I'll get to the colors in a sec. Our boundary corner, our boundary halfback, our free safety, and our field corner all high. Okay, those are our quarters players. Okay, from the boundary to the field, the boundary corner is looking to match that vertical from number one. So he's got number one to the vertical. The boundary half is what I like to call a post player. So he's got number two or number one to the post. He's that high inside wall, as I said, a post player. Okay, your free safety is your post player to the field. Okay, and now your field corner, he's the farthest from the ball. In this type of field side rotation, he's going to be the player that's potentially responsible for two guys going vertical. So he would have number two in the seam. Okay, he's going to, what I call a lean technique on number two in the seam, and almost play a horizontal 70-30 between that seam and a vertical from number one. Okay, the reason why I'm okay with that field corner being in that situation, not all the time, but as kind of a base rule, is that's the hardest throw on the field. There's not a lot of quarterbacks that are hitting, that Z on the 15, 18 yard comeback in high school. Even in university, that's a tough throw. And ultimately, I'll show you some ways you can get that field corner, out of that conflict if you get a team that's picking on you in this type of quarters coverage. So that would be kind of your base rule for your vertical players in a quarters coverage. Now underneath, my linebackers, are my push players. So the will is that third receiver, that third cover down player to the boundary. Unless he hears from the mic that the back is to his side, he is going to wall, and you can get into all your rules for how you pass routes from different sides of the field. That's very team specific, but he's looking for an inbreaker from number 2. He's going to push and get inside of and underneath number 2. If number 2 goes out or vertical, he can continue to push to number 1. Sam is doing the same job, working 3 to 2. He's going to try and force number 3 to use an outside release. And now he's going to work off that number 3 to the number 2. Same thing from our field half. He's really important. He's going to try and force an outside release. We'll get to that in a second. And now he is going to work 2 to underneath 1. And again, if the back doesn't release, our mic will drop. Some people like them a little more shaded to the field, middle of the field. That's, again, very team specific. If the back does release, that mic will now become the wall player, to that side and have the responsibility that Sam or Will linebacker was going to have. Now that Sam or Will linebacker can push to the back, through the back to the next man. My favorite way to play cover 4 would not be to have that pre-snap rotation with the boundary corner and boundary half both off. I think in second and long, that's fine. You're encouraging the offense to throw the ball underneath, certainly in the boundary. You're not giving up any vertical throws there, forcing the team to either take the underneath stuff in the boundary or force the ball vertically to the field. But one of the ways I like to kind of dress this up is to play my boundary corner outside leverage on number 1. And you can, depending on the player you have there, either play bump and run or just bring him down to 4 or 5 yards and play what's called a cut and carry technique. So he's going to force an inside release from the wideout, and he's going to carry a vertical from that wideout. So if you get 2 verticals, it is a stress point in the defense. Your boundary half is going to be inside leverage, again, on that vertical from number 2. So he's got all of number 2 to the post. Your boundary corner will have to carry this vertical, but again, forcing the inside release squeezes this window a little bit for the quarterback between the boundary corner and that boundary halfback. What it allows you to do is if you get some kind of, if it deters that short throw to the X receiver, and if you get some kind of underneath concept, let's say, number 2 actually runs to the out and the 1 tries to go vertical, we're going to squeeze that number 1 down, and ultimately the post player can wind up taking him, and the corner can take this out with the will dropping to squeeze into that window. Now, that very much depends on the kid you have at boundary corner and your ability to do that, but it's something that I've been able to find helpful in deterring teams from taking those quick throws into the boundary. To the field, everything else stays the same. The main concept I want to highlight here is we're forcing an outside release, particularly at this field half spot, because if we get, your traditional post route, that's going to eat up the free safety. And now our field corner is going to have to handle the verticals from 1 and 2. Again, using that lean technique like we talked about, playing 70-30, cheating towards that inside route, forcing them to make the long throw. And our field half, if we get 3 verticals, can continue to sink underneath that number 1, making that throw hard as he pushes to him, forcing that ball again into that deep outside part of the field that a lot of quarterbacks can't even get the ball to. But it is going to put that field corner in a little bit of stress in terms of him having to handle potentially 2 vertical routes. What we don't want to let happen is an inside release from number 2, because that increases the space that conflict player has to play in. So if our field halfback loses inside leverage and allows an inside release, now this field corner has a lot more space to play in, and the quarterback has a lot more room to kind of throw him down into that bender window, and it makes it a lot harder to play that lean technique at the field corner. Again, Mike's just dropping off the back. Sam in the field half should be pushing to take away that space underneath to the field. Another way you can play this look is if you don't feel comfortable having that boundary corner play cut and carry, you can, but you still want to have a flat player in the boundary, you can rotate the coverage into the boundary and now have the free safety be your post player in the boundary and rotate your Sam linebacker up to be your post player to the field, that high inside player. Now again, you could play the corner, in some kind of cut and carry relationship on one and really take away that space if you get a team that's trying to throw quick outs, quick slants, quick stops, or rub route combinations. But, he's still your vertical player on the outside. He has one vertically, okay? But now your boundary half can get hands on number 2 and push underneath. Okay, he is your wall player. So as he gets hands on number 1, he can only push hands on number 2 once number 2 has gone vertical or gone out. Okay, then he can look for that next target. Here, because we're rotating the Sam, our Mike now needs to drop to the field. He's no longer relating to the back. Here, the will relate to the back because we've rotated the Sam high. He's now the post player, making the Mike really the guy who has to do his job, working from number 3. 3 goes vertical to number 2, and that field half is still redirecting 2 to an outside release. Okay, and then pushing underneath number 1. And again, our field corner is going to play that horizontal 70-30, or what I call a lean technique. He's going to lean on number 2. Okay. Your will is now going to drop off the back, so if the back releases to the field, he's going to wall to the field. If the back releases to the boundary, he's going to wall to the boundary. If you're getting an offense that's able to take advantage of that field corner, having to cover both verticals, or you want to try and maybe have a little more support on outbreaking concepts from inside receivers, another way you can play this, particularly if you have an athletic Sam, and that's something, in the game today with spread offenses, that dime defense is so important. If you have a guy at Sam that can cover, that you trust, okay, another way you can kind of fortify your quarters coverage is to make him a carry player. So in the boundary here, everything's going to stay the same. You can choose how low you want the boundary corner, but he's ultimately going to be responsible for 1 vertically in the boundary. Our boundary half is still our post player in the boundary, and our will is still our wall player pushing after 2 clears his zone in the boundary. That all stays the same. To the field, our field half is still going to jam and force this outside release away from the quarterback. Okay, deter any sort of quick underneath route from number 2. But what we're going to do now is play our free safety outside leverage on that 3 receiver, and he is going to be responsible for 2 to the post. He's not going to have number 3 to the post if 3 goes on some sort of deep in or deep post route or diagonal route. What that does is it takes our conflict off our field corner. Okay, again, our field corner is now just responsible for 1 up and out. Okay, if 1 runs in, he can look to 2 or 3 coming back out to him. But we've taken this free safety, okay, with a post call, and now he's going to post number 2, and we've made our Sam a carry player. So if he's going to force an outside release, he's got to play with inside leverage, and he's probably got to give up a little bit of depth, okay? And we're going to take this vertical from 3 with our Sam to the post. Okay, again, also knowing it's not likely we get 5 verticals. There's a chance we get some late help, okay, from the boundary half if this route really works its way over into the boundary, or if this route really gets skinny up the middle of the field, our free safety could help us a little bit vertically on that. But ultimately, if we get, your traditional post seam concept to the field, our SAM is going to run with and cancel out that post. Our free has no responsibility to the post except for late help. He's going to take away 2 in the seam, allowing the field corner to stay out and take away number 1 vertically and be heavy there on the comeback and even be in a good position to play the dig as well. So you can cut the boundary corner and have him carry a vertical with a cut and carry call. You can also carry your SAM linebacker to a post route should you get one as a way of freeing up your field corner. Ultimately, you're rarely going to get 5 verts, but by taking a look at those couple different ways that you can make subtle changes, you can take away different route concepts and make reads a little more challenging for the quarterback because he doesn't know who's going to be responsible, say, for 2 in the seam to the field if you have the option of playing your SAM carry or your free safety post and your field corner having to lean on 1 and 2. Same thing in the boundary. Teams can't get comfortable throwing the quick game if you're able to either rotate your quarters into the boundary by bringing the free safety over and the SAM high, or by just cut and carrying that boundary corner to give you a little more of a flat presence in the boundary. That is our episode on quarters. Make sure you check us out on our YouTube channel and subscribe so you get our access to our daily content. And on both of our social media platforms, we're on Twitter and on Instagram at 3downdev on Twitter and at 3downdevelopment on Instagram.